History gets polished, edges smoothed. But revolutions are not clean. They are born in fire, in smoke, in men who hold the line when fear claws at the ribs. Victory was not inevitable. The revolution was forged in war. But it is understood in conversation, around tables, between friends, with books open and arguments alive. This is Rogue Island, ground truth of the American Revolution.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Rogue Island. I am your co-host, Ben Powers, and I'm here with...
Bjorn Bruckshaw.
Grace Bruckshaw.
And we are going to talk a little bit more about Benedict Arnold. As we indicated in our last episode, we're breaking down a three-part discussion of the hero of Saratoga, and Saratoga is what we are going to talk about today. So I'm going to hand it over to Bjorn, and we'll roll from there.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is our second episode of Benedict Arnold out of the three that we're going to do. This time we're going to talk about what happened after Valcour Island up until the end of Saratoga, where we all know that the British surrender. Ben, if you want to do a quick recap of Valcour Island, we know that they lost that naval fight, but it kind of paused the British, right?
Oh, you're exactly right. So in the summer and early fall of 1776, Guy Carleton is doing an invasion from Canada down into upstate New York with the idea of taking Albany, and it's a freshwater naval campaign, if you will. They've got to navigate down rivers and lakes, and Arnold is the admiral of a small fleet on Lake Champlain, and he uses the terrain on Lake Champlain, specifically a narrow spot between Valcour Island and the shore of the lake, to canalize the British naval force and invasion force. And he fights a tactical loss, but the battle itself takes up enough time that it eats away a big chunk of the campaign season. So even though he loses the fight at Valcour Island, loses a lot of the boats and ships that he had built, he has inflicted a delay on Carleton, who within a month decides it's too late in the campaigning season to continue. It's going to be winter soon, and he decides to move his force back up into Canada, which kind of saves the colony of New York until the next campaign season in 1777, which is really what it culminates in the Battles of Saratoga and is a big part of the Arnold story, which is what Bjorn's going to talk about today.
Absolutely, Ben. And that 1 year delay, I guess you would call it, was critical, right? It helped Washington, help the Continental Army to regroup and kind of figure things out a little bit. But, a lot of people don't realize after that, Benedict Arnold didn't get a lot of attention. He didn't get the credit he deserved. Continental Congress wasn't a big fan. They found him very, very difficult to work with. And at one point, Arnold actually kind of got angry and sent a letter to Congress because they were promoting people that shouldn't have been promoted according to Arnold, and he was not one of those people promoted. So he felt betrayed. He felt angry because he had done all this work up at Quebec and Valcour Island. Yeah, they may not have been these glorious victories or even a victory at all. He fought valiantly. They proved that they could actually fight, and he didn't get the recognition he deserved, including that, Ben, you and I both know he was shot in the leg in Quebec, right?
No, very true. And he's been active since the start of the war. I mean, he helps take Ticonderoga, which delivers the guns that Henry Knox brings down to Boston so they can cause the British to evacuate Boston. He leads the Quebec expedition up the Kennebec River. He's working with Montgomery. He gets wounded in the Battle of Quebec when Montgomery gets killed. He builds this fleet, which turns back Carleton's invasion. You're right. His combat record at this point is unparalleled. And he's like, hey, I'm a very meritorious officer, and that merit's not being recognized. But he's a prisoner of the system where general officer ranks are apportioned by Congress based off what state you're from, the number of troops that state provides to the Continental Army, and then your seniority. And so he's stuck behind people who's like, just because they got their commission first and they're from a state that provided more troops, they are ahead of me in advancement, but their combat record doesn't come close. And that resentment for a very ambitious man starts to build, like you were saying, Bjorn.
Yeah, absolutely. And to give you a heads up, the five men that were actually promoted before Benedict Arnold, one was, a man named Benjamin Lincoln, right? We know it was Adam Stephen, Arthur St. Clair, Thomas Mifflin, and a William Alexander, better known as Lord Stirling. So now Benedict Arnold is like, he was furious.
So the funny thing is, most people don't know those names. It's like,
yeah,
what did these guys do? Although, quick aside, I am a Benjamin Lincoln fan. We can talk about that in another episode.
It's true. So now, of course, I would be furious too, right? These guys didn't prove themselves like Benedict Arnold has done. So feeling insulted, what did he do? What anybody would do, and I would probably do. He wrote a letter to Congress resigning from the Army. Washington immediately noticed what was going on and stepped in. He was like, Benedict Arnold's a great man. We're going to lose great men who can fight and can lead if this Congress continues to act the way it does and not recognize those who are a valuable asset. So now Washington steps in, tells him he's the most talented battlefield commander, and actually worked with Congress to promote Benedict Arnold. And Arnold eventually agreed to stay, but he never forgot that insult. Because it is kind of insulting, right? He was just up there for years, losing men to sickness, being shot, and he was never recognized.
It's interesting because Congress kind of considered the military officers to be self-aggrandizing and not having the proper revolutionary dedication to the cause. Like, hey, I'm going to put my self-interest behind interest in promoting the cause. I'm going to paraphrase John Adams saying that they would fight for pay and promotion like apes fighting for nuts. And Congress just didn't understand the sense of honor that these men cultivated. And I don't think they truly understood the hardship of life in the field. And if you're able to create a reputation in that life in the field, you feel it deserves some form of recognition, not because you're a selfish human being per se, but because you see other folks who are not providing the same level of achievement or going through the same level of hardship who are seemingly passing you by. I think Congress had a blind spot here.
Absolutely. And Ben and I, we were in the modern military, right? So how many times, does an infantry guy say, hey, where's my officer? He doesn't know how hot it is. He's sitting in the AC in there, right? We're out here humping, right? that's the thing that comes to my mind most is he's like, they're not doing what I'm doing. They don't realize I have to march through snow and be shot. They're sitting at home comfortable by defenses of their own men that they're ordering. So now he in 1777, Benedict Arnold, after this whole controversy, returns to the Northern Army. Well, in April 1777, the British launched a raid in the town of Danbury, Connecticut, where Major General Tyrone led 1,800 British troops near present-day Westport. Well, their mission was to destroy, plunder, take ammunition, food, whatever they can. Well, they successfully reached Danbury, and Benedict Arnold heard about it. So now he sprung into action. And together with General David Worcester and General Gold Selleck Silman, Arnold gathered local militia and rushed to intercept the British as they returned to the coast. They stopped them, and that leads now with him stopping them and rushing there to stop. It still shows that Benedict Arnold was still active, still trying to fight even after everything that happened with being betrayed and felt being betrayed. So now it comes to later on, a couple of weeks later, April 27, 1777, the Battle of Ridgefield. Benedict Arnold and several hundred Connecticut militia moved to block the British retreat through the town of Ridgefield. Arnold knew he couldn't stop them because they were, twice his size of men. But he hoped, again, to slow them down.
I'm noticing a pattern here.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was just going to say. You're going to see that a lot where they don't want to defeat them. Their attempt is to slow their progress down, to slow their movement. Why? Because it gets the American and the Continental Army set up and ready to fight in these major battles that we're going to see coming up. So now when General Tyron's column approached, fierce fighting erupted. British regulars engaged the Americans in close combat. Militia and Continental soldiers tried to hold their line. Unfortunately, General Wooster was mortally wounded here. So now that leaves Benedict Arnold, the lone man on the totem pole, right, looking up. So now, as the battle kept going and raging, getting intensified. Again, we're going to see this. Arnold's horse shot out from underneath him again. So it's something between his leg and his horse that they just can't get away from. So now he narrowly escaped and he continued to fight on foot. So that also proves the type of fighter he was, right? He wasn't this, I'm going to say my horse. No, he knew he was going to fight, and he's going to fight with everything he had. It doesn't matter if it's on his foot, horse, whatever. So now, even though the British ultimately made their way through and made the safety of the ships, Arnold's actions received praise. And he's like, finally, people are seeing what I can do and how good I am. And for Congress, Ridgefield served as a more notification that Arnold was one of the most capable combat leaders out there, right? So once Congress realized that, they decided, hey, we're going to promote Benedict Arnold. So, when people say, oh, promote, he's getting what he wants. Yes and no. At first glance, it kind of does seem like he's getting that promotion. But this meant that officers ahead of him were also getting promoted. So he's still behind the threshold of where he thinks he should be.
He doesn't have the seniority that he wants.
Exactly. So it's still like a slap in the face to him because he doesn't want that spot that some old guy used to have and is now a mess, right? He wants to be in charge.
Yeah. Like, how am I behind Benjamin Lincoln? Kind of thought,
Yes. And I understand it to a certain point, but then on the other hand, it's like he's getting promoted. He's getting the recognition, at least starting to get that recognition he so think he deserves.
Well, I mean, seniority is a big deal. It's a big deal in the Army today, even to a degree, just from the standpoint of if you have two officers of the same rank, the one who is promoted to that rank earlier is going to be in charge. Like somebody is always in command, somebody's always in charge. So that seniority is more than just a point of honor to have hurt feelings about. It has specific meaning in a military context where that you would be placed in charge of operations of great responsibility because you had more seniority than other men of the same rank.
No, and now Ben, as an officer, I got to ask you this. Were you happy, as an officer, were you excited to get promoted? And when you didn't, Was it frustrating? And how would you, and kind of compared to what Benedict Arnold threw? If you were never promoted, you went through the steps, but you weren't promoted. When you got upset, would it make you work that much harder?
Oh, certainly. Now, I was never in a situation where my promotions were such that I got passed over for a promotion I thought I deserved. The first time I was not selected for promotion was lieutenant colonel to colonel. And based off my record, I knew that one was not going to happen. I had I did pretty well. I'm not going to pat myself on the back, and at the same time, I'm not going to be like, oh, I was a dirtbag. I was a pretty good officer, but I knew I wasn't going to make that jump. If I had the same type of record that an Arnold had, and I didn't make that selection, I could kind of understand where he would have been hurt. I mean, the selection process is night and day from 1777 2014 when I was considered for colonel. But still, if I had a record where I knew I should have been promoted and I wasn't, of course I would have had some type of resentment.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I would. I think anybody would, and almost to a certain extent. But the problem is, Arnold could not let go of grudges. Right, he could not. Right, he kept holding on, and eventually comes back, and it hurts him.
And
Right.
one thing I'm going to say again, not against Arnold, but putting on from in my opinion, common sense. He was incapable of understanding the larger political picture, is what I think. It's like, oh, you could explain it to him as a smart, rational man. Hey, you're not the only general officer. Connecticut's not the only colony becoming a state that we're trying to get troops from. We have to spread the wealth. That you could explain that to him till you were blue in the face. He would refuse to. Well, that's nonsense. That flies in the face of honor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I truly think he was incapable of seeing how a sacrifice for the greater good was necessary in these situations. Like he was certainly willing to sacrifice on the battlefield. I'm not saying he was incapable of sacrifice. I'm saying he was incapable of seeing that sometimes politics are necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. And then again, on the other side, it's almost the same scenario where Congress isn't looking at the big picture, right? They're not looking at what he's doing out there, the amount of stuff that they go through in order to fight. And then Benedict Arnold's not looking at the big picture of like, listen, it's not just you. Like we're trying to work together, right? So it could go both ways, and both sides were equally had tunnel vision, if you want to explain it that way.
No, that's a good point.
So now here we are, 1770, headed towards the summer of 1777, and Burgoyne comes up with this grand plan. Hey, we are going to cut off New England from all of the middle colonies. They're going to capture the Hudson. They would march south from Canada, seize Albany, and they think if we do that, the rest is history. We're going to win this war. Well, unfortunately, he didn't get the help he deserved. And as now he's trying to do this by himself, he doesn't have the troops, he doesn't have the amount of supplies he needs to do it.
Yeah, because you had the strategic situation. You've got Howe in New York, and
Yep.
Burgoyne's thinking he's going to get some type of assistance from Howe, and Howe's heading down to Philadelphia.
Yeah, and Howe actually got word, hey, we need your help. And he's like, nah, we're good. You know what I mean? He's like, no, we're not doing this.
Although
We're gonna go do Philly.
I do think Burgoyne had a big enough ego that he probably didn't mind so much until he realized he was in trouble. I think
Yeah,
if he was winning, he wouldn't have wanted to share the credit with Howe. And at
yeah,
first
yeah.
he was
I
winning.
agree.
At first he was
Absolutely,
winning.
absolutely. So now, if the British could isolate Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire from the southern colonies, the rebels in the rebellion just literally might collapse because now they don't have the men, they don't have the Continental Army, they don't have the leaders they need to fight. So Burgoyne, was a very, very confident man, maybe sometimes overconfident. And um, people named him, and it kind of it shows in his nickname. So first of all, they called him Gentleman Johnny. Gentleman Johnny was a nickname they gave John Burgoyne. He was a soldier, he was a politician, and he was a playwright. I don't know how being a playwright comes into playing in battle, but hey.
He was a Renaissance man. He had many talents.
Yeah, man of many talents. He's very charismatic and intelligent, right? But he also underestimated the dangers and troop sizes and underestimated the situation a lot of times, which kind of you'll see coming up here in a little bit why. So it was roughly around 8,000 men, about 78 to 8,000 men, 7,800 to 8,000 men, including British regulars, German auxiliaries, native allies. A lot of people don't realize that the native allies are with him as well. About 800 of those artillery crews and camp followers. So now as Burgoyne marched south, many of the Americans were like, uh-oh, stuff's about to hit the creek. So then came Fort Ticonderoga. All right. Well, first of all, we'll go back. This is General John Burgoyne. He wanted the loyalists to almost to a certain extent, not bow down to him, but give them everything they had, right, to support him. So now this is the British Army, right? Regulars, German auxiliaries, and here's a picture of, the native allies. And some of the native allies were the Mohawks, the Iroquois Confederacy, the Seneca, and they were numbered right about 800. But eventually, after they saw what had happened, they decided, hey, we're all set with you, John Burgoyne.
Well, they were pretty.
So now
they were a pretty significant force from the standpoint of you're moving through upstate New York in the 18th century, where it last of the Mohegans type stuff, even though that's from an earlier war. You need guys who know the terrain, who can act as your scouting force and your screening force. Those native auxiliaries are actually quite a big deal.
Yeah, and I can't say I know too much about them, but I would imagine the natives would come in handy, well, I'd say extremely handy on both sides of the coin, right? They know the land, they know hunting trails, they know all sorts of stuff, right? They know how to track. So I would imagine, they would come in handy, but also the natives probably would have been like, hey, we'll fight for you if you give us this land. Or we'll fight for you if you leave us alone. You know what I mean? Something along those two benefit them. And when those things fell through and they never got them and they realized that they weren't getting them, they were like, hey, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. So now, Ben, we come to the fall of Ticonderoga. Here we are. There's a great picture of us at Fort Ticonderoga back in 2021 when we were up in New York doing that archaeological dig.
You guys
so
look
now,
so young.
What's that? Oh,
you
man,
guys look so young there.
You don't have any gray hair. So now, Ticonderoga, we all know, was one of the strongest positions the Americans had at this point. It could control the route between Canada and the Hudson Valley, shipping. A lot of the soldiers and officers believed it was impregnable defense.
And it sits right on that point between, what is it, the southern tip of Champlain and the northern tip of Lake George. And so you got that north-south highway of water that is so critical to navigate between upstate New York and Canada. It's just a critical position.
Yeah, absolutely. But the Americans overlooked one part, and Burgoyne found it, and it was their weakness. It was the high ground, right? So now, the British artillery marched up and set out their artillery on top of this high ground. I think Ben, we've been up on top of that hill.
Yeah, we sure have.
We've been up. I unfortunately couldn't find the pictures, and they're somewhere. But it is up there. You can, if you have looked, you look over everything. You can see the entire fort plus miles added onto it. And people don't realize the importance of the artillery back then and having the high ground. right? You can't shoot uphill with a cannon because it's not going to go all the way up there. Now, if you have a cannon aimed down at you, you're in a world hurt. So once the British occupied those heights, the American position was untenable. Like you just couldn't stay there because it was just constant bombardment. And on July 6, 1777, the Americans eventually abandoned the fortress.
And
this was a what's that?
I was going to say, and as a quick aside, the Americans are under the command of this guy named Arthur St. Clair, who is above Arnold on the seniority list, and he's not doing such a great job.
Yes, and now you understand why Arnold has is seeing red at this point, right? So now, right, this is a major blow to the Americans, but a major British victory. You just took one of the strongest forts in America that controls the Hudson Riverway, right? That is a blow. And to me, it was, when the Americans decide, hey, let's abandon, it's almost like they gave up instead of trying to figure out another plan. But then it comes back down to the leadership, right?
Exactly. Now, one thing that I think is really interesting here is like that date, July 6th, because I know Burgoyne was expecting a fight for Ticonderoga. And when St. Clair decides to retrograde out of there, Burgoyne's schedule's now accelerating. And he's thinking he's doing great at this point because not only did he win a bloodless victory, he's gained time. Whereas last year they were delayed and ran out of campaign season. They're months ahead of schedule at this point.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the fact that Burgoyne realizes, hey, we won Quebec, we won Valcourt Island. Yes, we are slowed, but we still have that momentum in our side, right?
Roger.
So now Congress is furious. They just gave up the strongest point in America, or in the colonies, excuse me, at this point. They were so furious, and even the public were just like, what are we doing? We're letting these guys in without a fight. And to give it up without a fight is even worse. Like, it's like, oh, here you go. It's like the British think it's like taking candy from a baby, Like you said, the British were expecting a fight, but nope, he just leaves. So now people are starting to believe that Burgoyne can't be stopped. Rumors, Congress is talking about, the Americans are talking about it. Yet, the further Burgoyne marched into New York, the longer his supply lines became. And this becomes an issue, right? Because the further you stretch out, the big issues you have. And the Americans are starting to realize this. So now, right, we are one American, and Ben, I think you know who he is, one American general named Schuyler, Philip Schuyler, knew how to exploit those weaknesses. All right. So Philip Schuyler, he was, and I agree, he's been overshadowed by people like Benedict Arnold and Nathaniel Greene, rightfully so.
And
he was
not a combat general, but you're about to lay out why he was a great organizer.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a smart man. He was a tactical. He wouldn't tell you how to go fight a war. He would tell you where the weakest spots are, how to exploit their weaknesses, things like that. So as you'll see, in the actions of 1777, I believe helped create the victory for them at Saratoga. So he say, rather than risk the destruction of his army, Schuyler retreated. And what he did was, it was a calculated one, if that makes sense to you, Ben. He burned bridges. He blocked roads. He delayed, as we've seen throughout this now, delayed the British movements. Okay? He delayed Burgoyne's advance. So now they blocked streams. They turned every mile of Burgoyne's advance into a struggle. I mean, you have to. They're moving artillery. They're moving food. They're moving so much stuff. And now remember, there are about 8,000 British at this time. So that's a massive train that is moving. So you have a huge line of them coming at you. His men, Burgoyne's men, spent countless hours cleaning and clearing obstacles, which took away from actually him moving towards his, targeted point. So every delay that Schuyler gave him helped the Continental Army prepare, to stock up, to get whatever needs. Because I believe at this point, the Continental Army knows there's a fight coming. They know they have to do something. There is a fight coming. The problem is they're just trying to figure out where. So every day, more militia come to fight with Schuyler. More supplies accumulated. More defenses were prepared. And, Schuyler received them. This is one of the things that frustrates me. Schuyler received criticism for this. He was not, people didn't like what he was doing, which bothers me because he's delaying the British to give the Americans a chance.
A lot of people didn't understand what needed to be done in order to prepare for combat. They wanted a battle immediately. They wanted resolution. They wanted revenge for Ticonderoga. I don't think they quite understood what Schuyler's strategy was.
Absolutely. Now, Schuyler, if we look back at it, and if they looked at the whole picture, what he was doing, they'd be like, oh, okay, he's looking at the big picture again, right? We're delaying, we're stalling. But now, as Schuyler's doing, our man, Benedict Arnold, is starting to come into the scene again. He was making his way north. Benedict Arnold heard, here I come to save the day type deal.
There you go. Hey, real quick, Grace, who is General Schuyler's daughter?
Oh, Elijah Schuyler. No,
Who was she married to?
and Elizabeth. And I don't know.
That's all right. You got the big name, Eliza. And who did she marry?
Alexander Hamilton.
Exactly. Right on.
This kid, I'll tell you what. So now, Arnold returns, right? He's sent north to help stop Burgoyne. And we all know that Arnold is a very, very aggressive man. Very, very aggressive man. He wants to bring the fight to them. He doesn't want to say, oh, let them attack us. No, he doesn't want that. And we'll see that. He's and Grace, do you remember where that picture is right now? We've been there. That was the headquarters of where Benedict Arnold was. Right? We've been there at Saratoga. Ben and I have been there at Saratoga. All right. So now, here we are. Benedict Arnold's headed back north. When Arnold arrived again in the Northern Department, he brought what I believe is one of the biggest things that the Continental Army need, and that was aggression. He felt they were too soft at this time. He's like, you're running away, you're not standing up, you're not fighting. You're just running away. We need to stand and fight. So where others saw problems, Arnold was like, no, we got an opportunity right there. Right? So now, as soon as he would, he was considered, or, he was sent up, and he was considered one of Washington's most effective battlefield commanders. And Ben, to be honest with you, the only effective battlefield commander that I believe is better than him is my boy Nathaniel Greene. And I may be wrong, but what's your opinion?
I think I take absolutely nothing away from the prowess of Benedict Arnold in terms of on any field of battle. But I think that you get a guy like John Stark. I would put him up against Arnold any day. The thing about Stark was he didn't want to mess around with Continental Army politics, and he'd gone back to New Hampshire, and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to be a militia guy instead." And we might, I don't know if you plan on talking about him in a little bit or not, because he plays a role not at Saratoga, but in support of the larger campaign. But I don't think that Arnold was in a class by himself. I think you got guys like Stark. I think you got guys, I think Green is another one, William Washington, Light Horse
Yep.
Harry Lee. I think you John Glover. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's other guys who can play at Arnold's level.
Yeah, and I agree with you with that. I mean, even I unfortunately I don't talk about Stark, but I do talk about another man named Daniel Morgan eventually.
Oh,
Right.
how did I forget our boy Daniel Morgan?
Like I was gonna say something, Ben, but I didn't want to ruin it. So now, Arnold's sent back up north, and before Saratoga, there's Fort Stanwix, right? Fort Stanwix is an American fort, and Burgoyne sent St. Ledger down to try and take it. Well, at this time, they're besieging it. It was like late summer 1777, and the Americans found out they're besieging it, so they send up a column of militia along with Native Americans. And on their way, St. Ledger hears about it and he decides to send an ambush on them. Well, that ambush happened to be Oriskany. Oriskany now, the militia in Oriskany get annihilated. After this happens, now the Continental Army decides, hey, we need to really do something. So we're going to send our boy Benedict Arnold up north to do something and see if he could do it. Well, this is not, what he does is not the Benedict Arnold I know and not the Benedict Arnold anybody else knows about being aggressive. He decides to take a man where some records state that he was a prisoner in a British Tory by a man named Han Jost Schuyler. It's almost German if it sounds like it, but hey.
Yeah, I think he was it's like Dutch. I think he was a nephew of Philip Schuyler. I think. I'm not an expert on this.
So that's what the records state from what I saw was that he was a nephew of Philip Schuyler and that he was a Tory. Well, they called him the madman because he was crazy. When I say crazy, he would just pray and talk to spirits from what I read, he would sit there and have a conversation with nobody in front of him. And that's what they used to call him madman. So now what happens is Benedict Arnold tries to take advantage of it and says, hey, Han, we are going to have you go over to the British and say and convince them that there is a massive amount of American forces coming up to fight you. And you must be prepared because they are coming in force. Thousands and thousands upon troops are going to be here soon. So you need to leave. And what happens? He goes and tells them, and what does St. Ledger do? He believes him.
He raises the siege to Stanwix and gets out of there.
It is the most incredible thing because if some madman came up to me and said, 500 people are going to come attack your house today, you better leave. I'd be like, 911, you might want to come get this guy, So now St. Ledger's gone without a fight, without battle. What happens? Benedict Arnold saves Fort Stanwix.
And that has major strategic implications because you've got Burgoyne relying on St. Ledger to tie up forces in the west, cover his west flank, and then eventually join up with him. So he's lost a significant, at least 10-15% of the combat power he was relying on.
Yes. And it's funny because a lot of historians state that it was the most brilliant psychological operation of the Revolutionary War.
And that shows the dimension of Arnold as a commander. He's, like you say, he's an aggressive guy. The Arnold, is leading from the front, attack, attack, attack. This shows an operational dimension to him that a lot of people don't consider when you think about him as a commander.
Absolutely. Because he was like, hey, I don't know where he got the idea from, But he's like, oh, maybe this madman will help us. Maybe this guy, you know. And what happens? It worked perfectly.
And,
Um,
and the other thing
okay.
that's huge about this is this takes place in early August. So this is a month after Ticonderoga. And Burgoyne has not made the mileage he was hoping. He's starting to slip into a situation where he's losing time. He's still got time. He's still doing okay, but it's not the situation that it was a month ago.
Absolutely. And Ben, I just want to piggyback off of what you said. This highly affects Burgoyne, right? Highly affects because it's almost putting him in a spot like, uh-oh, my back's against the wall to a certain point, right? Because he was hoping that St. Ledger would not retreat and actually give him more leverage up in that area.
He's got to start picking up the pace. And also now you don't have a force that is sweeping down the Mohawk Valley. And I'm assuming he was relying on supplies from loyalists in the Mohawk Valley to support his army as well. And now he's cut off from that means as you said earlier, his lines between Canada are stretching and stretching and stretching. And now he doesn't have the Mohawk Valley as a secure supply source either.
Right, absolutely. And it's what Ledger, withdrawing and retreating. Uh, it's almost like he encircled himself and almost came to the point where he literally had nowhere to go. And actually, he kind of blamed St. Ledger for it. But now, after Fort Stanwix, this is going to lead up to Saratoga.
Let's get there.
Yeah, we are headed there right now, good sir. So now at Saratoga, so we're going to continue this slow advance south. And on August 9th, 1777, Congress removed General Schuyler from command of the Northern Department and replaced him with a Major General Horatio Gates. All right. So now Americans at the time, Schuyler was the scapegoat for the loss of Fort Ticonderoga. That's what people thought. He was the scapegoat. Anybody to blame it on? Schuyler. Right?
Well, he is the overall commander. I mean, St. Clair was the on-scene commander, but Schuyler was the department commander. And you're at that level, you're responsible for everything your subordinates do or fail to do.
Absolutely. And they don't, like I said before, they don't give him the credit for delaying, right? Blocking. And that's what kind of frustrates me because if they had seen at the time what he actually did, I don't know if they would replace him.
No, and I'm not a Gates hater, but I'm going to say that he really benefits from that month plus of Schuyler's work. If it would be one thing if he had taken over like on the 7th of July and he did everything that Schuyler did to pull everything together, but Schuyler kind of like, okay, we're like you said, we're going to delay, we're going to start pulling in militia, we're going to start consolidating, laying in supplies, and Gates is the beneficiary of that. And so his reputation is kind of built on Schuyler's work at this point, in my opinion.
Well, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that because in my notes right here, I literally state the army Gates took over was much stronger after Schuyler had it. And it like supplies improved, morale increased, militia units and militiamen poured into the camps, and it was much stronger because of Schuyler. Right, his actions grew that army, and now among Gates' subordinates, a man who we all know is Benedict Arnold. The two men could not have been any different from each other, complete opposites of the spectrum. Gates was careful. Arnold was aggressive. Gates was politically connected. Arnold was not politically connected. And Arnold was also very blunt, to the point, and very difficult to talk to. Very difficult to get an agreement out of. But they were both ambitious, both wanted recognition, and I believe at this point, Arnold wanted it more than Gates because of his prior. And before long, their personalities would collide. So now, here we go. Arnold versus Gates, right? The conflict between Arnold and Gates is fascinating. Arnold believed the Americans should attack whenever an opportunity appeared. He wanted to strike Burgoyne hard. He wanted to keep pressure on the British, and he wanted to literally destroy the enemy. That's why he was there. He was a soldier that wanted to go do his job, while Gates preferred a more defensive strategy. He was careful. He wanted to say, let's not take that chance. Let's pull back here. Why are we risking this unnecessarily?
And I think he was right in this instance. The defense is the stronger form of combat. And now we can sit here and talk about modern doctrine. Oh, you only take up the defense until you can transition to the offensive. But in this instance, Burgoyne's coming to you. You don't have to go seek him out. So I think Gates has a point here.
Yes, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate. I believe back then, too, the British weren't expecting the Americans to come out and just full force attack, So maybe Benedict Arnold was like, well, maybe we'll catch them off guard. We'll send 1,000 troops and hit them, and then we'll come back, So I'm not an officer. I would rather never be an officer in my world. I'll just be told what to go do. But and I understand both sides. Being an infantry guy, maybe I'm going to take them out, right? We're going to get them. That's what we're here. We're going to go do it. So now, as Burgoyne approached the American lines at Bemis Heights and Freeman's Farm, which we all know as the Battles of Saratoga. So now the road to Freeman's Farm, September 19th, 1777. This was the first Battle of Saratoga. All right. British had about 7,200 troops, but at the same time, their native allies were leaving left and right. Supplies, like we talked about that stretch of line that Burgoyne had, that was becoming scarce. And at the same time, the American army was growing because, and I'm going to go back and say, because of what Schuyler had done previously.
No, exactly. This is a perfect storm of bad news for Burgoyne, in my opinion, because as you said, the native allies have decided we're done, we're out. And so he's lost that screening force that knows the terrain, knows how to maneuver, and will help him locate where Gates's army is. He still has his advanced corps, the light infantry, the partisan rangers of loyalists, things like that under Fraser, but they don't know the terrain and they're not skilled woodsmen. Whereas you've got militia on Gates's side that they're locals, so they do know the area, and they're augmented by Morgan's riflemen who are skilled in the woods. And Morgan's riflemen has support from Dearborn's light infantry. So Gates has an effective screening force, and Burgoyne has lost his right at the moment where they're about to advance to contact. So the loss of the native allies at this point, its effect on Burgoyne cannot be overstated, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And not only that, but the British are almost encircled, right? They have their backs against the wall. So now they're losing their eyes in front of them to say they don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they're going, what's out there. So now his Western support failed. The natives were leaving. American army was growing, but Burgoyne was still thick-headed and thought he could force his way through. So on September 19th, 1777, the first Battle of Saratoga occurred, called the Battle of Freeman's Farm. On September 19th, he launched an advance toward the American position, and waiting for him were about 8,500 American troops, which the British fielded about 7,200. This was the stage for the first Battle of Saratoga. All right. So here we go with Battle of Freeman Farm. All right, the battle began with Daniel Morgan, right? Daniel Morgan, riflemen, encountered the British advance first. Morgan's men immediately attacked, and then throughout the day, fighting spread across the fields, woods, and open farmland. Units became separated, lines formed and collapsed, soldiers fought at close range. And actually, some areas changed hands a couple times. The battle became one of the bloodiest engagements of that campaign. And Arnold played a critical role in that. While Gates remained near the headquarters, Arnold moved constantly across the battlefield. And he directed reinforcements, he organized attacks, he identified weak points, and many officers later after that battle credited Arnold with coordinating much of the American effort. So again, right, you see that leadership. He's out there while Gates is in the back hiding in his tent. So you you see that going on. One observer recalled seeing Arnold everywhere. Wherever fighting became intense, Arnold seemed to be there. So he was not afraid. He was a strong man, and he was aggressive. And he thought that the only way to win a war is to be aggressive. And I could see that to a certain extent. So now, you see on the screen a map of the actual battle. So now one of the most important units on the battlefield at this time was Morgan's riflemen. And we just talked about him, right? Daniel Morgan. They were unlike any militia unit or soldier of that era. They knew how to shoot. They knew how to fight. They were gritty. They were armed with long rifles. And for those who don't know, rifles have like a carved rifling in the barrel to make that round go straighter, where a musket ball doesn't. So it could ping pong all the way down, and it makes it less accurate. So instead of firing into enemy formations, Morgan's men would always, 90% of the time, aim for the officers. And we know one officer, Grace, right? That Morgan's men ended up becoming a casual, or one of Morgan's men actually shot a officer.
Is he their first time his last name's like Murphy something?
Who?
The guy that killed Simon Fraser.
They don't know the exact name of the guy that killed him. Some have said it was like a guy named Timothy Murphy from Ireland or something like that.
Murphy has credit in the popular history, but that doesn't happen until Bemis Heights, right?
Yes.
So we're getting ahead of it. But anyway,
it doesn't happen.
It's okay. It's okay for us to have this conversation now. I just want the audience not to get confused.
Oh yeah. No, this doesn't happen until Bemis Heights. Since we were talking about Daniel Morgan, I figured I kind of. So now let me get back to Freeman's Farm, right? So Arnold directs the battle. He reinforces the weak points. He rides across the battlefield. British held the field tactically, but they lost hundreds of veteran troops. They took a casualty that was really, really costly to them. Okay.
Yeah, and holding that field in this instance was meaningless because, as you said before, this was Arnold leading an offensive that was meant to stop the British, but then they would pull back to their defensive positions anyway. Possession of Freeman's Farm at the end of the fight had no tactical advantage, and they stop Burgoyne's forward momentum.
Yeah, and not only that, but now the British, after they were decimated and with all these casualties, now have to regroup and rebuild and try and figure out a way. Okay, we need to get stronger again because there's a huge force over there that could come and attack us at any time again.
Oh, you're exactly right. And at this point, he's almost in the same situation Carleton was in a year earlier, because now it's the end of September, or coming up on the end of September. He hasn't hit Albany yet, and he's up against a much more aggressive continental force than he was expecting. Or I should say American, because there's plenty of militia out there too.
And Burgoyne's like almost in desperate mode here, right? So now, after Battle of Freeman's Farm, rumors swirling throughout the American camp about what Benedict Arnold did, how great he is. Well, Gates hears it and he's not happy. He is not happy at all. And eventually, Gates and Arnold get into it. They get into an argument, and from the records and what I've read, Gates removed Arnold from command. and he was forbidden from exercising battlefield authority. And Arnold was furious. His soldiers were furious. Officers were furious. Yet Gates refused to do anything about it and remained firm. He stood by this. And now Gates says he's not going to play any role going forward, but that's what he believed. And please, Ben, if you think I said something wrong or mistaken, please let me know.
No, I mean, this is certainly the point in the narrative where they have their falling out. So, I think
Okay.
we can discuss this as we move forward in the discussion.
Yeah. But, there's been that rumor where Gates was screaming and yelling and disciplining Arnold, and they were going at it and this and this. But then there are other ones where, okay, they had a conversation, you know what I mean? So we could go either way. So now reports, now with Burgoyne, right? So we know that Benedict Arnold was ordered to remain in camp. And now we come up to Burgoyne's last gamble. So Burgoyne's position had become desperate, right? They've got their back up against the Hudson River. And you can look at the map of Bemis Heights here. Their backs are pushed up against the supplies were dwindling. Reinforcements were nowhere. They didn't have anything. But Burgoyne refused to surrender. He refused to do anything. So in October, he decided to launch one last gamble. If he could find a weakness in the American line, perhaps he could still break through. He was not going to take retreat for an answer. He was not going to take surrender for an answer. And if he could break through, maybe he'll reach Albany. That's what he was hoping. I mean, it was a 5% chance that even less than that was actually going to happen, but he didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to hear that.
Well, and he's still not even quite sure where the main American line is at this point.
Yeah, and because you're right. The reinforcements didn't show up, and he had no recon. The natives weren't with him. They gave up on him, right?
Exactly.
But now the American army knew exactly where he was, right? And at this time, right, the British had about 6,500 troops. And now look at the amount of troops that grew on the American side, right? Militia. This amount of troops, and to cause this growth, again, goes back to Schuyler from what he did. And it continued. So now Burgoyne's plan is failing. His grand plan to come down, split the colonies, and to take this and take that had failed. And he's got one more breath, I guess you could say, in this attack at Bemis Heights. So now the battle begins. All right. So battle begins. Arnold's talking about it. He's hearing what's going on. And Ben, again, let me know if I'm wrong. I'm just going off of the research. But when the battle begins, there's a man named Simon Fraser, and he's up on a horse. And we'll go back to that, right? He's up on a horse. And Grace, why do British sit up on horses?
Because they think they're all high and mighty.
There you go. That is a great answer. It was their
My answer is so they can control their troops better, Grace, but you and I can disagree about this.
So, Grace, and I'm going to ask you this. What is the best way to cause confusion on a battlefield?
Kill their general.
Or their officers, right? To incapacitate, to wound. Why is that crucial?
Because they have no other option than to retreat.
Well, no, there's no,
Right.
right, but there's
They
no
don't want to do it.
communication,
They
right?
don't
Right? There's confusion.
Exactly.
So what does Daniel Morgan do? He sends somebody up a tree, and how many times does he shoot?
Three.
And on the third time, what happens?
do it.
He hits him right in the chest, and General Fraser is killed. Okay? So now, at this point, there is confusion. All right? American forces are starting, they struck Burgoyne's advance troops, Morgan kills Fraser. Enoch Poor from New Hampshire, Grace, right? His brigade attacked other American, and you'll look right here. You got Stark's brigade. We were talking about Stark. Poor brigade. Gates is in the center, or Lincoln's right wing, and you have reserve and artillery. And now, mind you, the British had Hessians on their side as well. I believe the Hessians were in control of the artillery at this.
You're exactly right. When they advanced down to Barbers Wheatfield earlier in the day, the Hessians have the artillery. And there's also, I want to say there's also a regiment of Hessian infantry. I haven't looked at the tactical dispositions on Bemis Heights, or I should say Barbers Wheatfield, in a little bit, but there should be some Hessian infantry. They're definitely in control of the guns. And then you've also got British light infantry, and I think you got troops of the 71st Regiment as well.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the 62nd Regiment. I don't remember exactly. But so now historians debate this, but I found this quote that Arnold had stated to Morgan, and it states, recognizing his importance, Arnold allegedly turned to Morgan's rifleman and said, "That gallant officer is General Fraser. I admire him, but it is necessary that he should die. Do your duty." So
that's definitely a romantic way of looking at it. Yeah.
I was just going to say that word. It is like he's trying to say it politely. Like, hey, he's saying, hey, I like him, but for the American cause, we got to kill him. Right. So that's the way. And it's funny that Arnold is the one that's saying, right? And he's saying it so politely because we don't see Arnold as saying that. I see Arnold like, go kill that guy right now.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So now, after Morgan, one of his riflemen kills Fraser, British officer states the death of General Fraser was justly considered as a public loss. So that shows how big of a loss he was to them. He was admired by the men, morale suffered, but now through the battle, Arnold takes control, right? He goes out there and again, Ben and we've had this discussion whether he disobeyed orders and went out, or he had this conversation. And like you said, our good friend Eric Schnitzer had found out and that he actually had a conversation with
exactly
Gates. And if you want,
so as you were saying before, after Freeman's Farm, they do have this falling out, but sometime between the 1st and 7th of October, they appear to have patched up their differences, and they were speaking to each other again. And Arnold's actually in command of the left wing. He's not relieved at this point. He's reinstated to command, and he actually requests Gates's permission to go out to Barber Wheatfield on the 7th of October when they hear the firing. And Gates at first is reluctant because he doesn't want Arnold to bring on a general engagement, but then he does give him his permission. So when Gates is on the field with Morgan, when Arnold is on the field with Morgan, like Eric's scholarship and Kevin Waddell's scholarship and more recent analysis shows that Arnold didn't rush out in disobedience of orders. He went with Gates's blessing.
Yeah, and I think, based off of what that occurrence, and I believe that Gates at that time knew Arnold was beneficial to this fight.
Exactly. Gates is a lot of things, but he's not stupid. He's not going to not have his most aggressive guy in the field when he needs him.
Especially when the British have their backs against the wall.
Bingo.
Right? When they're surrounded. So now Arnold takes control. And actually during this battle, Gates is back and Arnold is in fighting. And an officer later wrote that Arnold was the soul of the army. So he's riding on the front line. And so now as they're fighting, on the British right stood a fortified position known as Bremen's Redoubt. Defended primarily by troops under Lieutenant Colonel Heinrich von Bremen. It formed a critical part of Burgoyne's defenses. If the Americans captured it, the British line just might collapse. And Arnold knew this, knew what could happen if he did capture. So without hesitation, he led attacks against that redoubt. The fighting was intense. Musket fire was in the air. They fought hand to hand. And again and over, they fought until they finally broke through and the redoubt fell. The defensive line of the British collapsed, and the Americans finally felt victory. But during this fighting, that fight, Arnold was shot in the leg. He was shot in the leg that he was shot in Quebec, the right leg, which is horrible, but it's kind of funny. And actually, they state that to the point that his leg was seconds away from being amputated. That's how bad it was, they stated, and from the records. And so then when Arnold was shot, his horse is now shot underneath him, and that horse lands on that leg he just shot.
It's like a bad comedy sketch.
It's a bad dream to me. It's like the odds, right? How many horses has been shot out from underneath him now? 2? He's been shot in the leg twice, the same leg. Like it's inevitable that he needed to be shot.
Yeah, I mean,
inevitable.
Well, he's at the front. That's the thing. Again, say what you will about Arnold. We all know how this story turns out, but on the 7th of October, 1777, he is a fine combat commander and he's leading from the front.
Absolutely. And his men love him. People are following him left and right into battles. They know they're going to be victorious when they see a man running through musket fire on his feet trying to rally the troops. That's the kind of guy they want to lead them. So here, Ben, I put a picture up real quick. And so the left, this is the Battle of Bemis Heights, right? This is when you and I were up there. And you can actually see the musket ball marks and locations of different things where the battle took place. So now, as Arnold charges, he goes forward, he fights diligently. We talked about the death of Simon Fraser. This is the quote that Benedict Arnold stated. And Braement's Redoubt, we had just talked about that. The one thing about Benedict Arnold was he knew how to fight, and he didn't back down. And that's the one thing I will give him credit for, is that he didn't take, not no for an answer, but he didn't take a weakness and turn it into a weakness. He took a weakness and turned it into a strength, if that makes sense to you, Ben.
No, I get exactly what you're saying.
So now, during the assault, he was shot in the same leg, wounded in Quebec. Now Burgoyne is trapped. All right. So now they lost the Battle of Bemis Heights. Burgoyne is hopeless. He's got nowhere to go. American forces blocked the road. Supplies were exhausted. Ammunition was limited. No rescue was coming. And the once proud Northern Burgoyne army was trapped. One British officer described the situation simply as, "We were surrounded. There would be no escape." So now, October 17, 1777, nearly 6,000 British troops captured, and this was a major American victory. And this, Grace, was what?
The surrender.
It was the surrender, but what caused, who came into the war because of this victory?
I don't know.
Yes, you do.
I do?
They came into Rhode Island first. What Navy? The French Navy. Come on. This was the turning point of the war, where the French saw that the British could fight, or not the British, but the Americans can fight, and they decided to join. So,
wasn't it because Ben Franklin, because he tried to convince them, and then
No, you're exactly right. Franklin was our ambassador to France, along with John Adams and a few other folks.
Yep, you're right on. All right, so now I got to talk about Benedict Arnold's boot monument. To me, this is phenomenal because it shows the only part of Benedict Arnold which was patriotic, which was the leg he was shot in. And it's perfect. And this is actually the monument dedicated to right where, or the proximate area he was found shot and he fell. So now, here's a question I want to ask you, Ben. Was he a hero or traitor if he died at Saratoga?
Oh, if he dies at Saratoga, he is a hero. We'd be naming schools after him. There'd probably be a Fort Arnold.
Exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But now, after that, would you still consider him a hero?
You can't. Well, I know you've heard this. Like one aw shucks wipes out 1,000 attaboys.
Yep.
So he betrayed his country. He can't be anything but a traitor. He stained his own legacy.
Okay. Especially, and I think I agree with you, especially the fact that he was going to give up West Point
No,
for money.
But so we're down to less than a minute left on the clock, guys. So I think what we're gonna
That's
say,
it.
I think you hit the nail on the head on this one, Bjorn. And we're gonna go deeper. We're gonna do a third episode and discuss how he turned. But right now, he is a hero. He's the hero of Saratoga, and that's how we're gonna leave him today. So I'm Ben Powers, and this is
Bjorn Bruckshaw.
Grace Buckshall.
thanks for joining us, guys. And we'll talk.
Have a good one. Take care.